Ladies and gentlemen, this is Nate Crossbow, your host for today and forever. And welcome back to another episode of the Lawyers in the Making podcast, where it is my job to focus on the unique journeys to the law and law school of professionals in the legal field and law students. Let's talk about what we're doing today. Today, we have another incredible guest. He's a Chapman University Fowler School of Law graduate and currently works as a principal at Kowal Law Group. He's held past positions as a partner at Thomas Vogel and Associates and as an adjunct professor at Chapman University Fowler School of Law. Finally, he is the co-host of the California Appellate Law Podcast. So excited to have him on the podcast today, Mr. Tim Kowal. Welcome to the podcast. How are we doing today? Before going any further, I'd like to say a quick word about the sponsor of this podcast, Rhetoric. Back in episode 25, I had the privilege of having the CEO, Luke Yingling, on the podcast, and ever since that episode, fell in love with the product. Rhetoric takes user briefs and motions and compares them against the text of opinions written by judges to identify ways to tailor their arguments to better persuade the judges handling their cases. Rhetoric's focus on persuasion and helps users find new ways to improve their odds of success through more persuasive arguments. Know more, win more. I was able to see a demo of the product, and its cutting-edge technology and fascinating features make for a product I am proud to sponsor, and further shows the new digital era the field of law has been entering thus far on my journey doing this podcast. If you decide to book a demo, let them know Nate sent you. Be sure to check them out in the show notes below or at userhetoric.com. One word, userhetoric.com. Now, back to the show.
Hey, Nate, good to be with you. Thank you for that kind introduction. And like we talked about a minute ago, it's always a little bit uncomfortable being on the other side of the podcast microphone, being the one on the hot seat. So anxious to see what you have in store for me today.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, and I'm sure I will make you as comfortable as possible. That is my pledge for the rest of the episode, Tim. But let's start. Let's go all the way back. 1998. What a year. UC Irvine. You majored in philosophy just like myself. So if we end up talking about philosophy, you've all been warned. Everyone listening, you all been warned. But you there, 1998. And then 6 years later, in 2004, you ended up at Chapman University Fowler School of Law. So can you talk about what you were doing in between that and also answer the question of, simply put, why'd you go to law school?
Why did I go to law school? Well, those 6 years were, I was trying to find the big money in that philosophy degree that I was promised, and it took me a while and realized it was not there. I was sold some gold pyrite, some fool's gold there. No, I studied philosophy really because I just really enjoyed philosophy. First, I tried to find a lucrative degree. I majored in computer science for a while, and I really enjoyed computers. But I realized that computer programming just required more IQ points than I possessed, and so I had taken an intro to philosophy class and really loved it, and so I pursued that, and I got really into like Christian apologetics and things like that. I didn't, you wouldn't find me at keggers and things. I had my kind of religious revival during my college days, and then afterward I did go on to use my enthusiasm for computers, my computer skills, to start a computer business, and did that for about 6 years. And I also had some years of misspent youth playing in a rock band. But then finally, when I realized that both of those things were not what I wanted to do, and I really got I got the rock band thing out of my system, and I realized I wanted to find something else. And I think my mom had been the one to keep prodding me. Why don't you go to law school? Why don't you go to law school? And I finally decided to take the LSAT and just enroll. And really, the first day I got there, I thought, why did I wait so long? I just had a great time with it was like everything I liked about philosophy. But hey, there was actually a career at the end of this. Waiting for me. So it was, I just had a great time. I really enjoyed the philosophy of law. I enjoyed writing. I became editor of the Law Review. Just, could not get enough reading the law, writing about the law, and just had a great time with it. And then started my practice afterward, and And then, then here I am close to 15 years later.
Well, I mean, first I have to say the rock band stuff is amazing. I think personally it was well worth your time being in a rock band. I wish I was in a rock band, quite honestly. And what's funny about your Christian revival is that just like yourself, I was actually a political science major when I started college, and I took an intro to philosophy class, and I also was taking other political science classes, and I was like, this sucks. It is terrible. I don't think I could do this for the next 4 years. And I really, really enjoyed the intro to philosophy class. I love the mind body problem, all that stuff. But actually, opposite to yourself, I actually started reading Nietzsche first. So the Christian apostles sort of got pushed to the side. Now I'm trying to work my way back into that, but I was sort of pushed away from it at first. Friedrich Nietzsche got me all, in a loop there. But
Yeah.
let's talk about the first year, 2004. You're at Chapman University, Fowler School of Law. How was that first year? People love it. People have come on here and say, "Oh, it's one of my favorite years of my life." People come on here and say, "This is actually the worst year of my life." How was it for you?
Yeah, I could see both sides of that. I can see why. I mean, it really is. You're just being thrown into the deep end. But like I said, I had just fundamentally enjoyed what I was studying, and so that definitely uh, uh, makes it stick if you enjoy what you're doing. And I had my favorite classes. I really loved property law, and I loved contract law. I got my hands on an old horn book, like a restatement of the law or something, or just a practice guide, and started going through. I was even like reading ahead in contract doctrines. So, futility and frustration of purpose and things like that. I just couldn't get enough of it, and wound up getting the highest grade in that class. And you just find things that you really enjoy, and things that were, torts for some reason were a little bit harder for me. It just seemed more freewheeling. I still think that anytime I see a claim for emotional distress, intentional infliction of emotional distress, I just think, oh God, here we go. It's just a matter of how talented is the trial attorney, persuading that jury trial at the end of it, because anything can be emotional distress, and everyone is emotionally distressed by everything in this world. So it doesn't get my philosophical juices flowing to see an emotional distress claim, because it's more like drama than law.
No, but I think you're making an important point there because you found what you liked and you stuck with it and you leaned into it a little more. I'm assuming you probably took a lot more contract and property classes going forward in law school. But my next question would have to be, how did you sort of figure out what you wanted to do with the law? What do you currently do with the law, actually?
Uh, yeah, I didn't figure out what I thought I wanted to do is, well, when I was in law school, I mentioned that I really liked property, my property course. There was just maybe just because there were a lot of philosophical doctrines involved in it. The idea of where does property come from, and the idea of, well, you can get property by conquest or by being the first to find it. And talk about all these origins of the idea of possessing property. Locke's labor theory of property, that you invest your labor into it, and therefore it intermixes with yourself and it becomes part of your individual rights. So all these kinds of things were very interesting to me. But during my first year in 2005, the Supreme Court decision in Kelo versus City of New London came down. It was a big watershed case concerning eminent domain, that the government could take a city could take a little old lady's home, not to build a freeway, not to build a park or some other traditional public purpose, but because the Pfizer Corporation wanted to put a parking lot where her neighborhood was for its brand new huge commercial center. And Suzette Kelo asked, well, what is the public purpose for that if it's not being used by the public, just being used by a corporation? Well, the corporation is going to pay us money. And that was the public purpose, is that the coffers, the city coffers, were going to see some more tax revenues, and the Supreme Court said that was okay. That got everyone up in arms and got really interested in eminent domain. And I thought I was going to be an eminent domain lawyer afterward, but that didn't pan out. I wound up just doing a lot of business litigation. I got hired by a business litigation firm, am just doing, and you do get to see a lot of interesting things in business litigation. If there's trade secret disputes, and if you're in federal court, there are you get to deal with standing and diversity jurisdiction. So you find the interesting puzzles in the law in whatever area you practice in. And besides, if I were going to make a lucrative career out of doing eminent domain law, I'd have to represent the bad guys. I'd have to represent the cities of New London of the world who are taking little old ladies' property to give them to big corporations.
So following law school, you were a senior associate at Enterprise Counsel Group. Is that the business litigation firm that you were working at initially?
Yeah, they were a business litigation firm. They've subsequently been acquired by Holland Knight, a big law firm. But before that, I went off and joined my former partner Tom Vogel, who started his own firm doing the same kind of thing, business litigation. And it was at that time that I realized, someone, actually my current podcast co-host Jeff Lewis, mentioned to me, you seem to really enjoy doing the appeals when appeals come up in your cases. You can get certified as a specialist in that area. And I thought, well, hot dog. I never put two and two together, but I really did. I never did enjoy the practice of law as much as I enjoyed law school. There were little puzzles here and there that were fun to do, and you find most of those doing appeals because you get to sit down and really dig into the research and really spend time on the writing. And here I am now years later, and I'm able to specialize exclusively in appellate law, and I'm having just the time of my life doing that. So that's been the real payoff. You have to learn a lot about how litigation works, how the rules of civil procedure work, and see a lot of cases, read a lot of cases to understand how, to be able to spot when a case has gone awry. You have to see a lot of cases when they're operating normally to be able to spot the outlier. But now that I feel like I've amassed that experience, it really pays off, and really starting to have a lot of fun in my practice.
Yeah, this reminds me of something all the way back. It's funny now that I'm saying all the way back because there's been so many episodes, but all the way back, episode 3, I had Brian Ginsberg, who was the head of the appellate group at Harris Beach, and he had spoke about why he loved doing appellate litigation so much was because it gave him a ton of intellectual stimulation, as it seems you're describing right now, and that each case was kind of becoming sort of a meta expert in each sort of thing that he was getting. I know that he was the assistant solicitor general at one point for the state of New York, and he had worked on this river case where he basically had to do like a full 3 weeks of research into like the science of rivers and like how they move and how they go towards different ponds and stuff, something crazy like that. But it's just those little things that people enjoy. But I have to ask, from that, when you got into the real world, when you became a senior associate or I guess an associate at Enterprise Counsel Group, how was that? How was getting that first experience? What was that experience like, finally being free of law school and actually working in the world?
Well, it was a lot different. I mentioned I really enjoyed law school. I found a lot of things that I just enjoyed. I was really good at, like law review. And when I started practicing, then you're just, just like everything else, you're all of a sudden the small fish in a big pond. You know nothing now. Go from being a 3L and everyone on campus looks at you as being, oh, you're the student who knows it all, who's done it all, and then you become the lowly associate who knows nothing, has done nothing. And I remember getting thrown into my first hearing, law in motion hearing, just on a discovery issue. I still remember the advice one of the other associates gave me when I was walking out the door. He said, well, good luck, don't get sanctioned. That's a mark of success if you go out without the judge giving you a tattoo, ordering you to pay money to the court or the other party. So I didn't get sanctioned, so that was not too bad. I remember my first foray out, I actually got the judge to take the matter under submission, which means the judge usually comes out with a tentative ruling that says, I'm ruling against you. And I was able to talk the judge into saying, okay, well, let me think about it. I'll take it under submission. Judge still ruled against us, but it was a good feeling to actually, stymie the judge momentarily.
So speaking of advice, like the advice you got, don't get sanctioned. I'm gonna take that too. I need to go around and make sure I'm not getting sanctioned all the time. But speaking of advice, that's a mentorship there. Can you talk about how important mentorship has been for you?
Mentorship. Yeah, I still remember the partner, one of the partners of Enterprise Counsel Group. He's still a friend of mine, Ben Pugh. He kind of ran the civil procedure clinic of the firm, and he would, whenever there was a new associate, he would take them in and give them a couple of sessions of the nuts and bolts of how civil procedure really works. You know, you've learned international shoe is one of the big cases that you learn in law school about a due process and notice of lawsuits, and you learn about diversity jurisdiction and removing state cases to federal court. But you don't learn any of the things that you actually do on a day-to-day basis, like responding to discovery. How do you serve a lawsuit? You know, you write the lawsuit, you write the complaint up, then you have to file it, and you get a summons issued, and you have to serve this in a certain way, and you don't get taught the specific ways about how things get served. And I still remember the how Ben explained it, that, well, there's two ways to get anything. If you have a dispute with somebody in this world, there's two ways of doing it. One is you can call Guido and Bruno and have them show up at their door and say, we want the monies now. Or you could file a lawsuit, but to do that, you have to, dot every I and cross every T, and you have to have them served according to, the legal requirements. They have to be personally served or served in these other ways, or else it doesn't work. And then if they don't respond, then you get a default judgment, and then you get to go enforce and invoke the power, the deadly power of the state, to have the sheriff go to their home and start taking their stuff, or go to the bank account and start taking their money from their bank account. That's an awesome power. It's more powerful even than Guido and Bruno going and darkening their doorway. But you have to do everything absolutely correctly to get the judge to sign off and allow you to tap into that awesome power of the state. And so that was, I thought that was just a fantastic way of unlocking the kind of the interest and power of mastering the rules of civil procedure. Allows you to tap into the arsenal of the monopoly of power that the state holds.
Unfortunately, I'm ill aware of the ways of Bruno and Guido there, showing up to someone's house with some pipes, getting ready to kneecap someone. But I actually do know a lot about serving. I myself am a process server. My dad actually owns a process serving company, Preferred Process Server, Whitestone, New York. He's making me do this. No, I'm kidding. But I've served a lot of papers. Both of my brothers served papers for him. So I know a lot. I know a lot about those defaults, about people not showing up, about people. I'm the one who has your legal papers going up to people's doors, being like, "You
Yeah.
gotta take this." I need, like, what's your name? Putting down their height, their weight, all that stuff. And actually, this past summer, I then was able to take it to the next level. I was fortunate enough working in my DA's office, the Suffolk County DA's office, and I actually was able to take the info that they get from serving those people and put it into the summons, which was amazing for me. Because I was like, I've been doing this forever. And now I see what happens that next step to see what's taken after I serve those papers. Because usually I serve it, I send it to my dad, and that's really all it is. And I never got to see that next step. So I found it very interesting when I did.
Yeah. No, I think that's got to give you a great perspective on and just practical knowledge about how the law works when you see it in action. That here are the papers, they have to be actually served, and I'm sure you know that the rules about there are people who say, that they're confronted with the process server and say, are you Jim Smith? And you say, yes, like, you've been served. And then they raise their hands like, no, I'm not going to take the paper, so you can't serve me. It's like, that doesn't work, Or remember my process server telling me a story about a woman who he was trying to serve, and she got in her car and started running away and to drive away, and he was able to reach her windshield and put it under the windshield wiper and say, you've been served. And that's effective. That's effective service. So yeah, you can't just run away from service, but it's yeah, it is there are a lot of technicalities in that area. And so once you know that, I think you get an appreciation of how important the rules of service are. And a lot of what I do as an appellate attorney, it's just another I mean, it's a lot of the rules of civil procedure, and then invoking the jurisdiction of the Court of Appeal is also another layer of invoking the power of the state. And you have to file the notice on time. The notice has to say certain things, and it has to be filed by a certain date. And if you're even a minute late, I love cover these cases that are literally a document served or filed 1 minute late, and too bad, so sad. You don't get to appeal your ruling against you.
Oh, I know that all too much. My dad's sending me rush papers. He's like, "Hey man, you got to get this in by 3 p.m. or I'm losing business over here." So I'm getting in my car and I'm going wherever I gotta go. I know one of the best stories, because I usually go to offices, so I'll serve like the Secretary of State or some other like independent companies who do it. And I was serving someone up in Albany one time, and I go to the door, and the lady like answers it from the ring, and she's like, "Oh, I paid that last week." And
Yeah.
I was like, "Listen, I don't even know what you're talking about." But I'm like, "I'm just the messenger." That's usually my saying. I'm like, "Listen, I'm just the messenger. Like, here are your papers there for you." But she was trying to tell me that like she had paid the bill already, and I was
Yeah.
like, "Listen, like I'm like, I don't even know like what bill you're talking about, but like, here are your papers. Like, so sorry. Like, this is just my job." It was very funny.
Yeah, no, a lot of people. I see a lot of people, or hear about them, trying to negotiate with the process server, or cussing them out. It's like, look, I'm just doing a job. I've had process servers, visit me, even visit my home, and I'm not happy about it, but they're just following orders.
Of course, I mean, I know my brother has definitely been in some, both of my brothers have been some dicey situations. The best is people will have like the fenced in like fronts, and they'll let the dogs out, and they have like, two pit bulls in the front just barking. And my brother's like, "All right, maybe I come back tomorrow."
Yeah.
But I usually entangle the mentorship question with networking. But as time went on with the episodes, I realized that they're two very, very distinct things. But can you talk about networking, how it's had an impact on you, and how important it's been for your career thus far?
Networking, well, frankly, I didn't do, I wasn't doing much networking at all, until I decided that I wanted to build out my appellate practice. Because I figured, well, I'm just an associate. I'm working for someone else who's bringing in the clients. So I'm just the worker bee. And it's only once you've decide that you want to have your own clients and you want to be doing your own thing, that at least for me, it's when I realized networking was going to be important. And yeah, I think so in that regard, yeah, networking is important, and it's important to network without acting like you're networking. No one wants to be at a networking meeting. It's got to be about making good relationships, deepening those relationships, and making them authentic at least as far as they go. Not every business relationship is going to be a love connection, but hopefully that your people are understanding who you are, what kind of service you provide, why you're doing what you're doing, and get a real sense of that from you. And you can only give that sense of authenticity if you know why you're doing what you're doing, and hopefully you enjoy doing what you're doing. So once you do that, it's easy. And so I don't know how to I don't know what tips I have for someone who hasn't found what they are meant to do in this world. I guess the only tip would be, the secret to success in life is authenticity, and if you can fake that, then you've got it made. So I could say either find what you love doing, that is going to be of value to someone else, or fake it.
Fake it till listen, I'll probably say I still am. Fake it till you make it. I mean, I when I first started doing the podcast, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know the first thing about podcasting. I mean, I listened to podcasts, but when you get there, when you're like sitting here and actually doing it, I know you know it well, you have your own podcast. When you're really sitting down and doing it, you're like, oh my God, like this is a task here. And ever since I've just been just fake it till you make it. And eventually it gets authentic, it gets genuine, and I love doing this. So It's the perfect, it is the secret sauce, as you were just saying. But you mentioned value. Can you describe what you, in terms of what your thinking is, what value is to you?
Well, it's always a work in progress. In litigation, I mean, there's one easy measure of value, and it's winning cases. But of course, there's no way to guarantee that you're going to win any particular case. So you have to try to find a way to bring value beyond just the binary of winning and losing. And one thing I've been thinking about is in litigation a lot. I think I came across a stat one time. I can't remember the exact stat, but it was something like, okay, in every lawsuit, there's going to be a winner and a loser. And so if I were to ask you based on that, what percentage of litigants do you think are happy with the result afterward? You'd probably say, well, 50%. The winners are happy, the losers are unhappy. But actually, the stat that came out, it's something like 70 something percent are unhappy with the result. So that means people who are winning lawsuits are still unhappy with the whole process, which means, for a lot of these poor suckers, it's like a lose-lose situation. It's like I can go in and I can spend a lot of money and still lose, or I can spend a lot of money and win and still feel like I've lost. And that's probably because you spent either more money on attorney's fees than you won in the litigation, or you won a great result, but you could never enforce it against the other side, or just because the opportunity cost and the emotional drain of litigation was just not worth the whole thing. And so that's a depressing thought for an attorney in litigation who wants to try to provide value to their clients. It's not even enough if you win your case, because that stat would suggest that some 50% of winners of cases still don't feel happy with their outcomes. You have to find a way to add value some other way, and I try to always kind of at each checkpoint of litigation talk with clients about here's where you are now. This is what's likely going to happen, even in the best case. Maybe it's time to think about trying to cut a deal or doing something else. And then at the end of the litigation, hopefully try to I see them as ending one chapter of their life, and hopefully it sets them up to embark on a new, brighter chapter of their life. And so those are the kind of things that I mull over when I try to figure out how do I add value. But obviously, I want to give them the dignity that their case is being told in a way that that can't be ignored. Not just going through motions, but coming up with a real story of their case that makes them feel like they've been heard and that they're being heard by a court. And so even if they don't get the outcome that they're looking for, they have left it all out on the field, so to speak.
Yeah, that's honestly a great answer, by the way. But I love that question so much because I get such a diversity of answers in terms of what people are thinking, what their view on value is, because it really shows it shows volumes as to what can be effective, what can't be effective, what is actual value towards people. Because at the end of the day, it is a business. You got to make a profit. You got to make sure you're hitting your margins. And just to switch gears a little bit, but you were an adjunct professor at Chapman University, Fowler School of Law, civil procedure, teaching that. You did that for 2 years. I love asking this question. Would I want you as a teacher? Sell me on it.
Would you want me as a teacher? I thought it was a fun class, and I thought what was hard about that class for the students is that year, or maybe it was I did it for 2 years. At least the first year, it was a required course for first years, and they had added this required unit and then also another required. I think it was an LRW clinic. And so they added 2 units on top of an already busy schedule for first years, and a lot of them were not happy about having been overburdened with these 2 extra units. And but I enjoyed it. I tried to make it fun. I gave examples from my own cases. about, why these things that you're learning are important, like, removal of cases. And we went over practical things like how to serve an initial round of discovery requests. And then what do you do with those discovery requests? How do you successfully or validly serve objections to them? And then what do we do? Like meet and confer letters and a start of a motion to compel, things like that. Things that you would actually be tasked with doing your first few months of being a litigator. That was, I think, the impetus for the school starting that course. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed telling the stories and trying to get the students engaged in the course. What was really tough about it was grading the assignments. And I had to, was required to grade to a curve, which was, I thought, brutal, because, how do you grade these objections, especially from a practical standpoint? Maybe as a professor, I could, if I wanted to just be very, I don't know, critical, and I could just say, well, your objections were formatted better or had fewer typos, so you get a higher grade. But in actual practice, that doesn't matter at all. So I felt like that a lot of ways of grading the homework assignments were fundamentally arbitrary. So I just felt it was really tough to grade the papers, and yet I still had to do it and give someone the high grade, and someone the medium grade, and someone the low grade. And I always felt terrible about it, and I spent way more time than I should have. That was ultimately why I didn't continue doing it. I enjoyed teaching the class. I abhorred grading the assignments.
Yeah, well, first I have to say I'm sold, Tim. I'd love to have you as a teacher. But I think what's great about what you were saying is that you're offering them practical knowledge, things that they can use going forward after law school and in their actual legal career. I think that's so important, giving practical knowledge, because I always ask the question when I see that people were a professor. I have to ask what kind of teaching methods that they did, and I always get that practical knowledge was always something that they really had emphasis on, because it is important. It is really, really important. You're giving people value in terms of your teaching, things that they could take away, things that they can actually use going forward in their legal career. But I want to talk about the Kowal Law Group. Now, every time I talk to attorneys who have started their own law groups or their own business or office, it kind of opens up a Pandora's box. There's a lot of struggles that goes into it. Can you talk about the struggles that went into opening your own firm, getting those clients, all that stuff?
Knock on wood, it's been a very positive experience so far. I was able to take a lot of my clients with me. So when I started, I was not starving for business, and the clients have been finding me. The phone has been ringing. I had been doing a lot of content production. You mentioned that I started doing a podcast close to 4 years ago now, the California Appellate Law Podcast. And like you, it was like you mentioned, it was a little bit uncomfortable to start at the beginning. I don't know what I'm getting into, but it's been a very positive experience for me. And people find me through the podcast. They find me through LinkedIn, because I post a lot of blog posts on my website blog, and then also post them over to LinkedIn. So attorneys will find me, and clients will find me on either LinkedIn or on the website, and then also through networking activities through the various groups that I'm active in. So it's been I've been getting clients through all those different efforts, and so that hasn't been a huge struggle, other than managing time. Everyone has the same 24 hours in a day, and so now being responsible for my own pay, and not having the luxury of thinking that oh well, no matter what happens, no matter how much or how little I work, I'm going to get the same paycheck every 2 weeks. With that out the window, and knowing that I have to keep working if I want to keep the lights on, and keep hitting newer and higher milestones, I have to keep working harder, and then you realize that there's only so hard you can work before exhaustion catches up with you, that you have to work smarter and start discarding things that you're doing that don't work, and taking networking groups that maybe they're not paying off as much, and take a step back from those, and maybe content generation things that maybe are taking too much time, find a way to pare back on those. So it's a constant, you always have your fingers on the dials to find the perfect calibration of things. But that's been the struggle, and there are much worse ones that I might have had, and I thank God that I haven't. I haven't had to go, and my family hasn't had to go without food, or without, with the risk of not having a shelter or anything like that. So it's been very good. I count my blessings.
Yeah, I think first I'm a lover of cliches because I think they speak volumes. And working smarter, not harder, is so important. Something that I love to talk about. And in a book that I've read, The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, love that book very much. But he talks about the 80-20 principle extensively.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show that a principle like that 20% of the things that you do actually give you 80% of the outputs, or 80% of the happiness that you get. And I think it's such a blessing and a curse to have your own business, be your own entrepreneur, because as much as the upside is, okay, I'm my own boss, I have control over my time. The downside is, oh my God, I'm my own boss, I have control over my time. I have to do what I have to do in order to meet the ends. And it's up to you. It's only up to you to figure it out. And from that, I have to ask, what sort of tips would you give to people in order to work smarter and not harder?
It really depends on the type of person. I love productivity books. I know 4-Hour Workweek's a big one, a very popular one. I haven't actually read that one, but I know about the Pareto principle, the 80-20 principle. I love tech, and trying to find enhancements in productivity using tech, but not everyone is as tech embracing as I am. And so sometimes I have a great tip I think everyone needs to hear about, and then I'll tell a group that I'm a part of, and they're like, yeah, I don't, not interested in that. But then another thing people love doing. So it's hard to say. You just have to find tools that work well for you and lean into those. Find good, I think coaches are very powerful. You got to have, especially if you're a solo, if you don't have a partner, and even if you do have a partner, get other perspectives about how you can do things better. I've got 2 business coaches, one for marketing and one for helping me with the back end. I had never hired anyone before, and I didn't know first thing to do to go about it. And so my coach helped me, draw up the job listing and figure out what markers we needed to hit and things like that. So held my hand through it. Things that are even these things, when you see it, it's like, oh, well, that's really simple. Like, I should have thought of that, but I just never done it. And it was not in my comfort zone. And so you want to have someone, a coach, mentors who can help you with those things. And same thing with networking and making sure that I'm, you'll tell me, no, you're spending way too much time on that, drop that, or cut this in half and do more of this, because this is where you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck. So just having outside, if you can get outside perspective, whether it's a spouse or a friend, or a colleague, or hiring a coach, try to find sounding boards in your life. And if you can structure those so you have a weekly meeting with someone to talk about these things. My wife and I have a weekly lunch where we talk about what's going on with the firm, what are we struggling with, how do we get better, and that's really helpful to have those checkpoints. Otherwise, it's just day in, day out, you're just drowning in the business of law, and you don't get an opportunity to see the checkpoints. So talking about those checkpoints at regular bases really helps.
Well, speaking of tech, perfect segue into my next question here. Speaking of tech, I have felt doing this journey, going through this podcast, that the law is on the precipice of a new era. Things are moving in a certain direction. More people are more appealed towards tech, just like yourself. More people are moving towards AI products. More people are moving towards using these new technologies that are helping them become more productive, using them as tools to enhance and cut some overhead for their businesses. So can you talk about what your current tech stack looks like and any recommendations of products or tools that you use throughout your daily work life that help you.
Well, I love the term tech stack. So whenever someone uses the word tech stack, then they're my kind of person. I love talking about tech, as I mentioned. Yeah, there are a few. I think even one of the defining traits of the Kowal Law Group that I put on our website is that we do lean into tech. We're tech savvy. We try to find ways to use tech to enhance the services that we provide. And one piece of tech that's become a cornerstone in what we do is ClearBrief. ClearBrief is it plugs into Microsoft Word, and what it allows you to do is while you are drafting your brief, you draft your brief on the left-hand side of your Word window, and on the right-hand side, you can see the document that you're actually citing to. And then when you produce the brief, when you produce the PDF version of the brief that you're working on, ClearBrief links the two so that whoever is reading your brief can say, okay, well, the plaintiff says that the defendant, well, whatever the fact is, defendant has a pit bull, and then you can link, and it says appellant's appendix, page 97. You click AA 97, and it takes you right to a picture of the pit bull in the record. And so it's a great tool to allow the brief writer to show and not tell everything. And I've also used it internally, not just for producing briefs, but producing memos and letters to the client, so that when I am telling the client about their case, why their appeal may be untimely because of this document, then I can cite that document right in the memo that I send to my client, and it just really impresses the clients and opposing counsel or co-counsel that I'm working with to see this high quality work product that we're able to produce using ClearBrief. Another piece of tech that we use is Notion. Now, Notion is not specific to it's industry agnostic. It's so flexible that it's almost hard to hard to explain what it can do. In short, what it does is everything. I use it for producing my content. I use it for my client relations manager or contact relation manager. I use it as my knowledge base for my firm. You can create little wiki websites so that anyone can see this page that you're working on. I keep all our firm passwords in there that we can easily share with everybody. So as you build it out, it becomes very, very powerful. I store all my research in there, and I can link that to other things. I think it's called a relational database, although that's not even a very good descriptor. But it's got kind of a high learning curve. But we come to rely heavily on it now. And then my two new favorite pieces of tech for email, I've replaced Outlook with Superhuman, and I replaced my Outlook calendar with Motion Calendar, which has a built-in AI-based task scheduler. So no more, having a separate task list that has no relation to what you're actually doing that day, and no more just setting tasks and forgetting about them. You put a task on your Motion Calendar. It'll ask you, how long is it going to take you? Half an hour, okay, or 2 hours. Okay, it's 2 hours. Do you want me to split that up into 30-minute chunks? Okay, and it'll do that, and it'll just follow you around until you mark it done. And it'll keep making time for it at opportune times in your calendar. And right now it's telling me I've got 9 tasks past due, so I have to check and see what I'm falling behind on. But that's been great. Both of those apps have been great. And Superhuman has kept me at inbox 0 for the last 4 months.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I love, first I have to say, I love Notion. Notion is amazing. Notion's kind of crazy. I know, like you said, it's a really high learning curve. I use it a lot, just like yourself. I use it for a lot of my content. I use it a lot for organizational purposes, reaching out to people, seeing who have answered, seeing who have not answered, sort of just keeping track of everything. It's really good for that. And I know it has the multiple tabs on the side, and you could share it with other people so people can have instant access to that stuff. I can't get enough of Notion. But Superhuman and Motion Calendar, I've actually never heard of, and will absolutely be looking into, after this because they sound amazing and it's something that I need. I'm a big post-it note guy. Maybe I can finally drop the post-it notes and get and get a service that will replace all the post-it notes that are all over my room. They're literally all over
Yeah.
the place, just reminding me of tasks.
Yeah, I learned of superhuman by listening to another podcast. It's Ernie the attorney.
Oh,
I've had him on my podcast, and he's an attorney coach, or yeah, he's a coach for other attorneys, and he's very tech forward. So his specialty is advising other attorneys how they can leverage tech better in their firms to work smarter and not harder. And in fact, he has recently rebranded his podcast as the 80/20 principle.
yeah.
So he is big on the 80/20 principle and again leveraging the right tech, not chasing shiny objects. He doesn't advise taking up every new tech that comes out. And then when I started Superhuman, I thought it was just so game changing that I actually Googled what kind of calendar are Superhuman users using, and that's how I found Notion. So they marry together well.
Yeah, all the way back, I believe it was either episode 16 or 17. Ernie the attorney was on this podcast and spoke. I think it's still to this date one of the longest episodes because we talked about tech for so long, and he's just a fascinating person, amazing human being. But he has such a wealth of knowledge that I've actually gained a lot from. He recommended a lot of things for me. I know specifically one was Voxer. I've never heard of it before.
Mhm.
But that's been really, really useful going forward in terms of communicating with people, just using
Yeah.
voice messaging, a lot of the asynchronous work that can be done. So,
Yes, yeah. Speaking of Voxer and asynchronous work, that's another big one. And Ernie talks about Loom, using Loom videos a lot, and I use that almost daily. Anytime I need to tell my paralegal how to do something, I start to do it, or start to write an email, or I start to show, and I think, no, stop, start a Loom video, record it once, and then I'll never have to explain it again.
yeah, I mean, let Ernie the attorney, Ernie Sevenson out here giving everyone these tips. I can't recommend it enough. I can't recommend Ernie enough. He's such a great guest that came on. He talked about it so much. I talked to him as well afterwards a lot, and he's very much helped me out. So shout out Ernie, absolutely.
Yeah.
And just as well, for all those folks out there wondering, all of Tim's stuff, his content, his blog, his podcast, his LinkedIn will all be in the show notes below. So don't worry if you were wondering out there, where's all of Tim's stuff? It will be in the description below. Don't worry about it. But switching gears, well, I don't know if this is switching gears, but official, live on the Lawyers in the Making podcast, Tim Kowal, what are your book recommendations for people out there? It doesn't have to be about the law, but just some of your favorite books, something you give a gift to someone, a couple books.
Oh, yeah, I'm a big reader. I love reading books. From productivity books to philosophy, political philosophy, fiction. Probably the book that I just really loved from a few years ago. Actually, the book is 30 years old. It's called Centennial by James Michener, and I stumbled on it I was looking for. I'm big on watching Westerns, and so I was looking on Prime for Westerns, and then somehow I stumbled across this miniseries, Centennial, that had run in the late 70s, and I started watching it, and I loved it, and I realized it was based on James Michener's book, and I actually watched the miniseries and read the book, and they're both fantastic in their own right. So it just kind of wrinkled my brain reading that book and watching that miniseries. So I love that one, and then another big fiction book that I think is on a lot of people's top 5 list is Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. That one was just the term page turner is thrown around loosely, but that one I listened on audio. Almost everything I read, I listen to. I count that. I give myself full credit for listening. It's no better or worse than reading. It counts. But I could not stop listening. I remember one time playing frisbee with my son while I was listening to it, and I think a frisbee hit me in the head once while I was listening to it. I was so entranced.
But oh, I love to hear the philosophy books. I just started reading again because I was thinking about it and I was like, because I love old books. I'm like a lover of old books. I pretty much only have old books at this point. I'm starting to reach into the new generation stuff, a lot of the productivity stuff. The 4-hour work week especially was one of the new ones that I got into, opening my mind up to these things. But I started reading The Prince over the weekend. And honestly, it's a really good business book.
Yeah.
I found it to be fascinating in terms of it goes back to a lot of business principles, a lot of stuff that people write in a lot of business books nowadays. I saw a lot in the Prince and what he was talking about. And I love Machiavelli a lot. I've read a lot. I've read discourses on Livy too, and he's just a fascinating person in general. But I thought there was so much parallel between a lot of the principles that are out there on business and the stuff that he was actually talking about in terms of, a prince, how to sustain your power, how to keep it, how to conquer things, what should you do when you conquer things. And it's very, very similar in a business presence. Like when you start your own business, what do you have to do? Just go to the prince, he'll tell you about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you like Machiavelli, you might consider reading James Burnham's The Machiavellians, where he talks
Yes.
about the Prince, and he talks about several other books that are in a similar vein. But that one also is a classic.
I'd be remiss. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that one of my favorite books. I was redoing my book because I don't have a fancy shelf. I should get a fancy shelf now. I currently only have a crate that holds all of my books. And I was looking through it yesterday and reorganizing it just to make sure nothing's getting crushed or anything. One of my favorite books ever, The Brothers Karamazov.
Oh yeah.
It's a big one. It's very large. I think I looked yesterday, it was like 1,045 pages or something. But page turner is an understatement, and value is an understatement. That's probably my favorite book of all time,
Is
personally.
it?
I think
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah. I've been listening to Jordan Peterson's book, Maps of Meaning, and he
Mm.
talks quite a bit about. I mean, Dostoevsky is his favorite author, and the Brothers Karamazov, I think, is his master work. And especially if you don't want to read the 1,000+ pages, I think you can find just the Grand Inquisitor, the short
Oh,
story that's right in the middle of it, and that is just has endless depth to it. It's an amazing story.
it's the greatest. I think it's like one of the greatest pieces of writing because what makes it so great is that it's not even his argument. It's actually his counter argument to his
Yeah.
actual argument that he's trying to make throughout the book. It's amazing. Oh my God, I can't believe there's like they turned into like a short little like movie, the Grand Inquisitor, and they have the same conversation. It's Jesus and the Grand Inquisitor in the jail cell, and they
Yeah.
go through the whole thing. So I watched that a couple weeks ago, and I was like, oh my God, I might have to read the book again. But I'm like, hold on, look, it's a tall task. I was like, I got a lot going on. I'm gonna wait till summer comes around, classes are over, and I'll dive right back into that book. But like you said, if you don't want to read all 1,000 pages, The Underground Man, less than 100 pages, is a spectacular book. As you see,
Yeah. Notes from Underground, or the couple
oh,
different.
Notes from Underground. He is the
Yeah.
Underground Man, but his Notes from Underground is the official book title. But as you see,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Dostoevsky. He's one of my favorite. I've read almost every one of his books. I think I'm missing a couple of the early ones, and then The Devils I haven't read before. But I read The Idiot. I've read Notes from the Underground. I'm trying to think of the other one that I have from him. I can't think of it right now, but I'm just an absolute lover of Dostoevsky.
Yeah, yeah, I love Notes from Underground, and my favorite passage is the observation about human nature, about how he's totally imperfectible, and how utopia is the right philosophy for the wrong species, because you give a man nothing but cakes and surround him with bubbles of bliss, and he'll still do a nasty turn just to prove that he's a man and not a piano key. That you can't define me, you can't make me be nice. I'll be nasty just to show that I have free will.
Yeah, the piano key one always sticks out to me. And like you were saying before, Jordan Peterson, that's how I got into all of this because I used to, freshman year of college, when I started doing philosophy, I did a lot of research into it. I wanted to figure out what was going on. And I watched a ton of his lectures that he did, and he would give all the book recommendations. Another guy like Kierkegaard, amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
I've actually never read any of his books, but I have read a couple of short little things that he's done. And
Yeah,
I
what
would,
is this? It's a fairly short book of his, about Abraham and Isaac.
yeah.
That fateful, where he was going up the mountain to kill his only son, and I remember being turned on to that by reading another book that I really loved, which was by oh gosh, now I'm blanking on his name. Who did it? It was also turned into a mini series. It was The Winds of War and War and Remembrance by Herman Wouk. And I found him because I think I watched a friend of mine. His favorite movie is The Caine Mutiny with Humphrey Bogart, and that's based on the novel by Herman Wouk. And I loved that novel. Watched the movie, listened to the audiobook, and looked up, and he had written this giant 2-volume book on World War II, a historical fiction on World War II. I was just mesmerized by that. But and a big part of it is following this character, Jastrow. The uncle, the scholarly Jewish uncle, and he won't leave. He won't leave Europe. He's in his social, academic, intellectual circles, and he's just not convinced that the Nazis aren't just a passing fad. And he winds up getting out, deciding to get out too late. And anyway, he's reflecting on he had fallen away from his Jewish faith, and only at the end does he come back, and he realizes that, oh, even Kierkegaard, that goyim, realized about why did God let Abraham think that he was going to take his son, but it's not because he wants the blood of children, but because it's all the other gods, the other foreign people's gods, who want the blood of their children. He doesn't want the blood of your children. He wants your love and faith.
It's the leap of faith. It's the leap of faith. When I first found out about that whole concept that Kierkegaard came up with, I thought it was fascinating. I was like, oh my God. But I think my favorite part about all these books is that if you just go back and you read The Republic, it's all in there. I'm a big Plato fan. I love Plato. I love old books. Plato's my favorite. And once again, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Aristotle. Speaking of productivity, that guy is the king of productivity. He's been talking about habit for like 1,500 years. I always find it fascinating when I read those old books and I see those same kind of principles, those same kind of first principles thinking that people are now implementing, like James Cleary's Atomic Habits. Like when I see that book, I'm like, oh, well, Aristotle's been talking about that for a while now.
Yeah.
But Tim, third to last question here. What are the types of things that you consume, not food, consume on a daily basis, either that be through social media, so Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Substack, YouTube, Reddit? I always forget something. Just some people that you follow that you really like and you would recommend to people, anything like that. What's crossing the transom of Tim's mind on a daily basis?
Yeah, I've confessed to people lately that I've become unidimensional. As just 9 months ago, I started my firm, and I feel like I do nothing but think about business. So the first things I'll mention, a couple of podcasts, business related podcasts. Ernie's I already mentioned, and another business coach, Melissa Shanahan, whose podcast. She rebranded hers. I liked the old name it's the name of her business, Velocity Work. Thought that was more memorable, but now it's more descriptive. Her podcast name. I think it's called the Business Owners or the Law Firm Owners Podcast, and that's she's very charismatic. She's very business focused. Gets you thinking in terms of I need to know what my KPIs are, my key performance indexes. So that you can make decisions about your business and your practice on facts and not feelings. And but beyond work, I try to read. I try to have my Kindle app open more than social media. And but I do love a lot of a lot. I get a lot of insight from Jordan Peterson, so I like a lot of his podcasts. Sometimes I still go and watch old Norm Macdonald videos. I just love his jokes. I love his long jokes that end with groaners. And then the humor is the person who's like Conan O'Brien, or who's indulged him for 5 minutes, and then that feeling of being had.
No, oh my goodness. Norm Macdonald, one of my favorite all-time comedians ever. I've tried to watch everything that there is on YouTube. It's so unfortunate that he passed away. And I know that when I first started getting into Norm, when I first like found out who he even was, I had no idea who he was until I got to college. Because one of my buddies had showed me a video of him, and was like, this guy's so funny. And I was like, oh my God, like he is so funny. And so I'm obsessed with Norm Macdonald. I've watched so much of his stuff.
Yeah.
And also on YouTube, speaking of Jordan Peterson, people talking about philosophy, having good conversations. And another person who unfortunately passed away, but Professor Dr. Michael Segru, he puts
Mm.
all of his lectures online. They're all on YouTube, every single one. I think he was at Princeton when he was doing it. But he has these hour-long lectures, going through Plato, and pretty much he has a great series on Plato, actually. It's like 8 or 9
Yeah.
episodes, but it's amazing. He goes through every book, goes through the little intricacies that are in it. And I know he started doing some webinars after that, but unfortunately, I think it was like a month or two ago he had passed away. But all his content is on there. I can't recommend him enough. He is absolutely amazing. Absolutely
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. And then two more real quick. Every weekend I'll pick up on Del Bigtree's The High Wire. It's a great alternative health free broadcast that comes out every Thursday. And then Mark Stein is a great journalist, very staunch free speech defender. He was responsible for getting a Canadian anti-free speech bill passed several years ago, and right now he's in litigation with Ofcom in Britain, where they have they don't have a First Amendment there. So I like trying to support him where I can. That hockey stick that you see behind me there, that's Mark Stein's his liberty stick, because he's in litigation with Dr. Michael Mann for having criticized some of Michael Mann's scientific work, and that got him in a defamation suit.
Well, those are great recommendations, I have to say. I'll be looking into all of them after this because I just need to consume knowledge as much as I possibly can. That's what Aristotle told me, so I listened to him. But second to last question, Tim, what does an ideal Friday night or Sunday morning look for Tim?
Oh, I'm a pretty boring person. As I told you, I played in a band for several years. But people now ask me, do you miss it? And I say, I honestly got it all out of my system. I don't have any desire to go out and do late nights or anything. So my ideal night is watching a movie with my family. But my wife and two kids are 12 and 9, and I like trying to introduce them to good movies. I mean, usually they want to watch some crummy new animated mindless thing, but I try to get them. We're listening to Animal Farm and the audiobook right now, and we're try to find, every Sunday night we watch Little House on the Prairie. Try to get them thinking that having an ice maker and air conditioning and a car full of gas all the time that we can drive anywhere, that was not the norm until very, very recently.
No, I love to hear that. I love that you have a family. You have those two kids. Congratulations on that. I know I'm a little late, but I always like to give my congratulations when I can. I want to have a family one day myself, and it's wonderful that you're cultivating. That you're giving them the audiobook of Animal Farm. I find that amazing. I'm gonna do that with my own kids as well. And Little House on the Prairie. My mom talks about that show all the time, and most of the time I have no idea what she's talking about. So maybe I have to look into. Maybe I have to watch A Little House on the Prairie now and figure what's going on there. What can I learn from that? But Tim, last question here. I do this at the end of every episode. What are your words of wisdom for the aspiring law students, the current law students, and the legal professionals out there in the world?
Oh, keep looking for someone who's doing something that you think is interesting and who looks like they're having a great time doing it. I think that may be the easiest way to, or maybe that's the best way to find happiness in a profession is not platonically. We talked about Plato, but not just looking at well, I really want to do this area of law, and that's important too. I mean, there's certain areas of law that will speak to you, but also look at people who are doing something in a way that looks, I don't know, that looks fun. I remember that there were certain people doing, practicing law that I just thought, I don't want to do it that way. That seems soul crushing to do it that way, or I don't want to be. pick up the phone to opposing counsel and growl at them because I still have to hang up the phone and go on living my life and being being who I want to be, and I don't want to have to pretend to be a different person. So I try to do it. I guess I don't know. Again, if you can find find something that you enjoy doing and that can give value to other people, that's really the secret. And try to don't stop until you can find that thing.
I couldn't agree more, Tim. Poetically said. But that's the pod. Thank you so much, Tim, for doing this. Thank you for coming on, spreading your wisdom, spreading your experiences. And for everyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in. Check us out, lawyersinthemaking.substack.com. Lawyers in the Making, one word, substack.com. And I will see you all in the next one.